Fantasy fanatics, degenerate gamblers, and NHL fans, it's your show. It's the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, and the NHL-wide Top 5 Fantasy Breakdown stops into the reigning Stanley Cup champion, Florida Panthers. Let's get this paper.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody, and welcome back inside the official Fantasy Hockey Lab. It is the Wednesday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Shout out to the everydayers holding us down, making us your first listen every single day. We couldn't be doing the show without y'all, so much love for the support. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's Game Time. Ooh, I like that new lead-in, Mr. Rodin. And also, this is the Florida Panthers episode. We only have one more stop on our NHL-wide breakdown. We're going to be talking about the Utah Hockey Club on our next episode, a couple of special guests as well. And then, my friend, mock draft Mondays, breakdowns, all of the draft prep that everyone out there needs. This is your source. By the way, the Florida Panthers, my friend, basically, for the most part, definitely up front, running back a very similar group. Bob back in the cage, the blue line still Studley. What are you thinking about this Panthers squad, Steele? Because still going to be a force to be reckoned with in that Atlantic Division and in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, this is still going to be a great team. You know, I know they lose Brandon Montour to the Seattle Kraken, but they're pretty much bringing the exact same team back. You know, they lose Anthony Stolarz, they lose Oliver Ekman, a good amount of depth pieces that helped them win the Stanley Cup this last year. But I mean, they're pretty much running it back with the exact same team. They're going to have Spencer Knight finally, it looks like, as the backup goaltender to Sergei Bobrovsky. You know, he's dealt with some mental health issues. He's dealt with some confidence issues, and he's dealt with some time struggling in between the cage for the Florida Panthers. So it looks like he'll be the backup goaltender, which we've been talking about him over the last 3 seasons, just really hasn't found his game in the NHL level. So that's going to be interesting to see as well. But when you look back at what they're doing from this last year to this year, again, pretty much the exact same team. I think for me, you know, even with the incredible season that Sam Reinhart just had, I'm going to go with Matthew Tkachuk as the number 1 target off the board from the Florida Panthers. First round draft pick, in my opinion, in the 16-team league. I think if you get into a 8, 10, or 12-team league, he falls into that second round tier. But for me, Matthew Tkachuk is just absolutely incredible in the value that he brings, not just the fantasy-wise, but what he brings to this Florida Panthers organization. I mean, when we first saw that trade, I mean, we've talked about it at length. When we first heard and broke down that trade of the Calgary Flames and Florida Panthers, it looked like the Calgary Flames absolutely fleeced the Florida Panthers and what they got. I mean, you obviously love getting a young player and the caliber of player in Matthew Tkachuk for the Florida Panthers, but Mackenzie Weegar, Jonathan Huberdeau, it just seemed like the Calgary Flames won that trade. Not the case anymore. Matthew Tkachuk is a difference maker, and he was a big difference maker in winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, they went to the Stanley Cup Finals, lost. They go back the next year and win it. Matthew Tkachuk is a huge reason for that. Incredible what he's done in his first 2 seasons with the Panthers. 109 points in his first season. Follows it up with an 88-point year right behind that. So obviously a close to a 30-point drop-off from or a 20-point drop-off from Matthew Tkachuk following that career year of 109 points. But Banger League beauty, 151 hits, 88 penalty minutes, 280 shots on net, 62 assists. He dropped from back-to-back 40-plus goal seasons to a 26-goal season. So the shooting percentage dropped off a little bit, but he has been a playmaker over the last 3 seasons of 60-plus assists. So for me, Matthew Tkachuk, first-round draft pick. The value that he brings, it's almost, again, like it's the way I look at Brady Tkachuk. I mean, the peripherals that he fills out is absolutely incredible.
Mm-hmm.
The physicality, the leadership that he brings at such a young age right now too. So Matthew Tkachuk, first round pick for me.
The energy, the swagger, the confidence of this entire team runs through Matthew Tkachuk. And you saw it in the postseason runs. This team really embodied his approach to the game. And of course, a lot of that is credit due to, I can speak for myself, and I think you in this one of our favorite coaches in the NHL, and Paul Maurice. This is going to be another very difficult team to play against next year, Steele. They had the 6th best penalty kill in the league, 8th best power play. They're up there for goals for. They're up there for almost every single metric. And that makes sense considering they got the most important one, a banner, one of them coming up for this upcoming season. Matthew Tkachuk, Banger League beauty. You said it. The only other player I would feel comfortable taking ahead of him in Banger League situations is his brother, Brady Tkachuk, because the peripherals, the Banger League side of things, a little bit higher, just slightly for Brady. However, Matthew Tkachuk has got to be the number 1 fantasy target on this Florida team. And they lose a little bit of their security blanket. Anthony Stolarz, you mentioned the D-men. Vladimir Tarasenko is out, but the core pieces are there, and they are going to be a very difficult team to play against. Like I said, however, coming in at number 2, Steele, if you don't mind, Sam Reinhart coming off that beast mode season, of course, I'd be fine with you if you took him at 2, but there is going to be regression. 94 points is not going to happen. 57 goals, definitely not going to happen again, especially when you look at the sample size of his career. Is he still a really good player? Is he still going to bring a ton of fantasy value? Of course. But I think he slides back into the 70-point realm, much more in line with the rest of his career. So I'm going to take Alexander Barkov ahead of him. Barkov is just far too good on the ice. He brings the peripherals more than Sam Reinhart as well. And when you look at the consistency of this man over the past 5 seasons, Steele, better than a point per game player, 88 points, 78 points, 80 points. Prorate the shortened season, well over 80 points. Barkov's my guy. He gets it done at both ends of the ice, Steele, and he is a game changer at both ends of the ice. So I'm fine with taking him second off the board for this Panthers club.
A little bit surprised that Barkov is the number 2 target off this board. I think when I look at this team right now, there's 4 players who are going to get taken in the top 5, top 4 rounds of the draft right now. I'm actually going with Sergei Bobrovsky at number 2. I think
nice.
I think a lot of people know how I feel, and I know how you feel now about drafting goalies too early. I won't draft a goaltender until after at least the 3rd round, 4th round. But I think when you look at what Sergei Bobrovsky has done over the last 2 seasons, especially with this team, in this last year, 36, 17, and 4 record. He had 6 shutouts, which was the most since 2018 in his last year with the Columbus Blue Jackets, a .915 save percentage and a 2.37 goals against average. You know, he didn't play too well 2 seasons ago. I mean, the record was still fine. He was 24, 20, and 3, but he had a .901 save percentage with a 3.07 goals against average. But then something switched. Something beastly turned on in the postseason last 2 seasons ago. And he just carried that right on through into the 2023-24 season, carried it on through into the playoffs, and absolutely put on a dominating performance against every opponent that the Florida Panthers went up against. Huge reason why they went to the Stanley Cup Finals the first time, and a big reason why they won the Stanley Cup Finals last season. He was almost unbeatable. He was making, characteristically incredible saves that we've seen him do time and time again throughout his NHL career. I love what I'm seeing. Again, one of these goaltenders that, you thought that he might start to regress as he gets older. He's 36 years old going into the season.
A lot of mileage on that body too.
Yeah, a lot of mileage on the body, but I mean, it's not like they've overspent his energy like we've seen a few times with these younger goaltenders. I mean, 50 games played, 54 games played, 58 games played. He has played a lot over the last 3 seasons with the amount of times they've been into the playoffs and going deep into it, but I really like the way that he handles himself, the way that he moves around in the blue paint. Sometimes it can be too much where it gets him into trouble, but the way that he, goes from post to post, the way that he swims a little bit when he's confident and he's in control of his body, it doesn't matter where he is in that blue paint or if he's outside. He's incredible. He's the number 2 target for me. He's such a fantastic goaltender.
I really appreciate you ranking a goaltender this high when, for the most part, in our rankings, you've been letting them fade. However, maybe that's just because this is the goaltender that went to 2 straight Stanley Cups and stood on his head in both of those runs. So I'm not even going to hate. How could I hate? Let's talk about it a little bit more after the break, along with the rest of the top 5 Florida Panther fantasy targets. Tomorrow's episode, a special guest for the Utah Hockey Club. Make sure you're tapped in. That's Friday's episode by the by. However, the rest of today's episode is still brought to you by our friends at Game Time. You know you got to be checking out the Game Time app. Super deals and all kinds of special angles for you to get tickets to your favorite event. Make sure you're checking out the Customize Your Spot that can get you tickets as fast as you need them, making it easier to get tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, and theater events near you, all in pricing. Everything you need, including a panoramic view from your seat on the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure for your second listen, you also go enjoy the Locked On NHL podcast. Locked On NHL provides you with a national perspective on all things NHL each and every day with national experts and local insight on every single team across the league. Available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. On today's episode, we talk about the reigning Stanley Cup champions, the second last breakdown of our top 5 fantasy targets across the NHL.
Yes, sir.
Last episode, we've got the new Utah, we don't know what they're called yet. The Utah Yeti
Hockey franchise,
the Utah Hockey Club, but we're going to break it all down with some special guests. So make sure you're staying tuned for Friday's episode. Flip, number 3 target off the Panthers organization coming into the next season. We went a little bit of a different route, but cannot deny that each of these players brings their own special value to what they do. So over to you, my friend. Number 3 that you're looking at from the Florida Panthers.
Look, you and I are interchangeable here. Perhaps I got Bob at 3. So thank you for teeing up everything you said about this player. Let me also throw this out, Steele, because, I know fantasy and the playoffs don't align. However, let me just hit you with this. 915 save percentage for Bob 2 playoffs ago. 906 save percentage last year with a 2.32 goals against. I don't know if you remember this. You and I discussing, it seemed like Bob was almost not fully tested for the most part of the postseason, and then he turned it on when it mattered the most. So the angle of what you're covering in terms of his ability to just also be a clutch performer and get wins when this team needs it the most is one of those intangible angles that I absolutely love. He's got to come in at 3 for me, and you know how much I love Carter Verhaeghe, but he is just not as valuable as a guy like Sergei Bobrovsky, who's putting up numbers, shutouts, and otherwise. So I'm with you. Bob comes in at number 3, but Carter Verhaeghe's still on this list for me. However, who you got at 3? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, number 3, I went with Sam Reinhart. So just a little bit of a switcheroo for both of us at number 2 and number 3. Sam Reinhart, I think for everything that you said, I mean, he's such a good player right now in his career, and he showcased that over the last 3 seasons with the Florida Panthers. I mean, he was a great player with the Buffalo Sabres, but it just wasn't the same type of caliber that you have and the culture that you have with the Panthers right now. And this has always been a very durable player, doesn't miss a lot of games. He pretty much has played a full 82 regular season throughout his career. Maybe a handful of missed games throughout the season, but for the most part, very durable. I mean, the peripherals speak for itself. 2 back-to-back seasons of over 225 shots, 66 blocks, 78 hits. I also see the regression with this player when it comes to his goal total. I mean, he has never before. I mean, he had that really good season of a 19.2 shooting percentage back in his last season with the Buffalo Sabres in the COVID season. He was shooting at 24.5% this last
That's
year.
crazy.
He had 27 power play goals. He's never done that before. I mean, he's been good on the power play. He's gotten over 30 plus points on the power play, but the most power play goals, 16 power play goals, 11 power play assists, compared to this last year where he had 27 power play goals and 7 power play assists. So still in the realm of what he normally does on the power play, but I don't think we're going to see over 20 power play goals from Sam Reinhart.
No, I don't think so.
I think that goal total drops back down into the 35, maybe the 40 realm of where I'm putting him at right now. But point total drops down from 94 to 80. I think, again, he just really overexceeded expectations and outplayed his average draft position from where he was taken last year. I mean, he finished actually ahead of Matthew Tkachuk. He finished 7th on the fantasy rankings in most formats. So Sam Reinhart, great player. He's going to bring the value. He's going to bring the shot totals, the peripherals that you need, power play points. I'm putting him somewhere in that 3rd round right now, honestly. I think he's going to get taken a lot higher than that, but early 3rd, maybe late 2nd is where I'm placing Sam Reinhart for the value that he brings.
Yeah, and I guess in my opinion, I would wait slightly just because of the angles you're talking about. And with regression, I also, when you look at how good those numbers are, and obviously he was right there as the top goal scorer in the NHL after Austin Matthews. So there is that attractiveness to this player for this upcoming season. I'm going to be wary of it, though, Steele, and I'm going to wait slightly for him. That's just me. Is he going to get sniped up? Probably. This team scored the 11th most goals in the NHL last year. I think they should be right there in the cusp for the top 10 once again. So the value will be there. I just don't want to reach, especially when I'm okay banking on some of those first few players that we mentioned. And I am going to take Barkov ahead of Reinhart. However, let me spit it out. I got him at number 4. So you and I aren't too far off here. And I don't think you can be with this team. That's how good these top options are. And look, we talked about Paul Maurice. This team's relentless on the forecheck. They're very disciplined. They don't lose many puck battles. All of those little things that don't exactly jump off the fantasy page, but they do translate in this team being successful, and that does. So you covered the Sam Reinhart angle very nicely. I want to talk a little bit about some of these players that don't come into the top 5 after the break, because I do still think some of these names, Steele, you can augment your roster at the very back end of drafts, and maybe not that deep into drafts, because your boy Gustav Forsling, I think we need to talk about him. Let's talk about a couple of other names as well. You know, I got to talk about Carter Verhaeghe. However, Sam Reinhart comes in at 4 for me. Who you got at 4?
At number 4, I have Alexander Barkov, and I'll make this real quick so we can come back from break, list off our number 5, and then some potential candidates for breakout seasons. Alexander Barkov comes in at number 4, and I do really love this player. It seems like I always draft him on a year-end basis for my fantasy team. I will say the thing that really kind of pisses me off about this player is that he does seem to miss quite a few games every single season. 73 games played this last year, 68 the year prior to that, 67, 50 in the COVID season, 66 the year prior. So, I mean, it's not like he's missing more than 15 games a season, but you would like to have him closer to the 82 regular games than, and then finishing with 70 or 71. He just seems to always miss at least, a dozen, just less than a dozen of games a season. But again, one of the best, if not the best, two-way forward right now. I mean, Patrice Bergeron's gone. It's Alexander Barkov, Selke Trophy winner. He's always in the Selke race year in and year out. He's won it twice in the last 4 seasons. 104 hits, which he's never done before. A career high for him was 52 the year prior to that. So physicality is bumped up for Alexander Barkov. He's right there in the middle of his prime right now. He's going to be 29 years old in 5 days. So he's right in the middle of his prime right now. It's showcasing that over the last 3 seasons. 88 points, 78 points, 80 points. So, I mean, if he could play a full 82-game season, I think 90 points is definitely in this guy's realm.
Oh, for sure.
He hasn't been able to get there. He was a plus 33. If that's a huge category that I've played with in many formats. So
Definitely.
again, the defensive ability, the two-way ability of this player's game right now is incredible. 193 shots. The peripherals are very nice for him. Always been the playmaker. Again, he can find you with his eyes closed in the back of the parking lot and through multiple guys. So Barkov is absolutely amazing. Again, I would like to see a little bit more, maybe some shots on net from this player. Back-to-back seasons of 23 goals. I think he can be a 30-goal scorer, which he's done multiple times in the past. I know perennially he's been a 20 to 25 goal scorer in this league, but for me, he comes in at number 4. I think Barkov, again, right after Sergei Bobrovsky, he falls somewhere in that late to third, fourth round for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of top tier, start of the draft options here, Steele, that I really don't think you can go wrong with. And, I mentioned the responsible nature of this club overall. So those plus minus numbers, some of those advanced metrics, not all of them add up into categories, but they all play into this team going to be back in the mix for one of the top clubs in the NHL. Perhaps, though, with the target on their back, 2 years now basically being the best team, at least in the East, there are going to be a lot of squads gunning for them, Steele. They're not going to want to see it run back 3 times as this team being the squad to take out most of the elite competition in the East. So is there going to be some slight regressions in terms of the Sam Reinharts and some of these outputs for offense? You could maybe expect it. However, let's talk about some of these peripheral pieces right after the break. And I'm excited for Utah on Friday's episode.
Utah, last NHL team that we have to break down. Make sure you tune in for Friday's episode with special guests. We can't wait for it, and we can't wait for the new season coming up. But also coming up is the 5th target from the Florida Panthers, as well as some breakout candidates from this roster. Once again, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, the follow button, leave a 5-star review, and make sure you start DMing us on our Twitter account at LO_FantasyNHL. You can also DM us on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. If you are interested in our 2 fantasy listener leagues this upcoming 2024-25 season, you can DM us on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know which league you are intrigued by, which league you want to join for this upcoming season. Give us your information, your name, and your email. We'll add you into the list, and we'll again, from last year, what we did, we'll do a randomizer, and we'll pick because we had over 50 potential listeners want to join our leagues last year. So we'll try to do it as best as we can. Last year, we did a randomizer for each league based on who wanted to join where. But if you want to join, again, make sure you DM us on Twitter at LO_FantasyNHL or on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod. Give us your information. We'll add you onto the list, and we'll break down all of that going forward over the next 2 weeks. Again, we'll put some polls out on our Twitter account. We'll make sure we put out all the information about when the draft day will be, what the draft format will be, what the entry fee will be. Stay tuned for all the episodes moving forward because we got to break down so much, but we also got to break down the rest of this episode. 5th target from the Florida Panthers. Flip over to you, my friend. It's got to be your boy Carter Verhaeghe. If I had to assume, it's got to be your boy Carter Verhaeghe.
Look, slight regression in terms of shot total, the point total, down 1, goal total, down 8. Still a beauty and still a player that can really shoot the puck with the best of them. One of the most underrated, sneaky, good releases in the game today, Steele. And yeah, I'm high on this player, but the numbers back me up. And I understand 34 goals last year is a regression from 42, but he is a 40-goal caliber kind of player in his prime now. And look, yeah, I've been talking about him for a long time, but just look at him on the ice. He was clutch for this Florida Panthers team, game-winning goals, OT, he's there. And when I look at the makeup of this lineup, and of course, Paul Maurice is going to do his thing with deployments as he sees fit. But Carter Verhaeghe on the wing with Alexander Barkov and Sam Reinhart on that top line, I want a piece of it, Steele, because that is one of the best lines in the league today at both ends of the rink. So if you're talking about just getting a little bit of piece of that action, Verhaeghe being deployed with Barkov and Reinhart on that top line and is definitely going to get a look on the top power play, which includes Ekblad, Tkachuk, Barkov, Reinhart, and himself. Loving this player, loving all of those offensive angles. And if you're just talking about a purely offensive boost, because look, 63 hits, 20 block shots, and 36 penalty minutes don't jump off the page. They're okay. They're not great. Offensively, Carter Verhaeghe, the perfect middle of the draft steal for you. I'm taking him. I'm comfortable taking him in the 8th or 9th round if he falls that low.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the first 4 players that we've talked about, I think those guys are all getting taken ahead of the 5th round. I think once you get to Carter Verhaeghe, who I also have at number 5, you can wait at least until the 9th.
Okay.
But just like for what you said, a little bit of a regression season, not by much, just by 1 point. I think, again, I think he can be a 40-goal scorer in this league, but again, he's only done it once right now. 35 to 40 is where I'm putting him at. I think 70-plus points, 75-plus points is where I'm also putting him at. But again, on that top line playing with Sam Reinhart and Alexander Barkov, so the ceiling in the sky is astronomical. He really does have a lot of potential to go as high as they bring him and as high as he plays and continues to play with them. So lots to love about this player. The shooting percentage has been great throughout his entire career. A career 14.9 shooting percentage. He has an absolute underrated wrist shot, underrated shot just in the NHL. When you look at his metrics and statistics throughout the playoffs as well, 21 points this last postseason, winning the Stanley Cup. He had 17 points the year prior to that in 21 games, 12 points in 10 games the year prior. So he's really found it, and he really turns it on when it matters most in those clutch moments. Mr. Clutch is what we've called him over the last 2 seasons, with multiple incredible game-winning overtime goals from Carter Verhaeghe. So love this player too. Maybe not as much as you do, but he's absolutely fantastic out there. Toronto-born type of player as well.
True.
Drafted by the Toronto Maple Leafs. One that at this
good
point,
Niagara Ice Dog. I love that.
Yeah, good Niagara Ice Dog. We look back now and we're like, okay, maybe this was one that kind of got away from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, we've talked about a lot of young guys not being able to get that opportunity sometimes in Toronto. They go somewhere else and they start playing incredible. Trevor Moore is another player that comes to mind. Mason Marchman is another player that comes to mind. It just happens to be in this organization. There's a few out there. Carter Verhaeghe, one of them. He is number 5, but for me, honestly, it's kind of close when it also comes to Sam Bennett. So Sam Bennett is a guy that I think is right there that could be at the number 5 target. He falls just a little bit behind Carter Verhaeghe, but you can't deny what Sam Bennett brings to the game, the physicality, the energy, the boost of confidence that he gives his teammates, always backing them up. He's a banger league beauty with 173 hits, 100 penalty minutes. He still brings the points. I mean, I think this guy can easily get to 50-plus points. He's dealt with some injuries the last couple of seasons, 69 games played this last year, 63 the year before that. So maybe that's something to keep in the back of your mind when looking at Sam Bennett, that he misses a lot of time. But if he can play close to 82 games, 50-plus points is in his realm.
Love that. I'm also going to take a look at Anton Lundell after a 6-year deal and an extension. Yeah, he's kind of cemented into that third-line center role. He's not exactly jumping up to steal minutes away from Alexander Barkov, but maybe he slides up and he takes some of that second-line minutes. I don't know, Steele. I'm looking at Anton Lundell, though, as a very valuable back end of the draft. Maybe he's your last player that you take, or in more shallow formats, I'm looking at him as a nice week-to-week, but who I'm really going to look at is Gustav Forsling, because if he does end up taking power play one time and anchoring it, Aaron Ekblad, I could see it, but I'd actually probably lean to eventually it going to Gustav Forsling. 102 hits, 111 block shots. Actually, reverse that. 102 block shots, 111 hits. How about this deal? He led the NHL in plus-minus at plus 56. Also brought 160 shots on net, 43 penalty minutes. If it's not Sam Bennett right there outside the top 5 or on the edge, it's got to be Gustav Forsling, a player that I know you're really high on. Let's talk about a whole lot more, though, on the next episode. And I'm really, really hyped for our listener league, draft prep, and to drop the puck on this season, baby.
Mock drafts awaiting next week. Monday mock draft will be our first Monday mock draft of the upcoming fantasy
Giddy up.
season. For mock draft, you can expect a mock draft every single Monday up until the start of the regular season, fantasy season as well. So once again, make sure to DM us on Twitter at LO_fantasy NHL, as well as Instagram, Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod, if you want to join our fantasy listener leagues, and we'll make sure to put you down on the list. Just make sure to give us your information, name and email. We'll get you on the list, and we'll make sure we have all of those leagues finalized by mid-September so we can get prepared and ready for the upcoming fantasy draft.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Pod your first listen every single day. Go check out the Locked On NHL podcast. Subscribe to them. Great things they're doing over there, providing a national expertise with a local perspective. You can find the link to the Locked On NHL in the description below, so you don't even have to search for it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. From both Flip and I, we also wish you good luck with your bets this summer, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.